Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to you about a book I just finished that let me just say, spoilers for the review, not for the book. This is going to be one of my books of the year, hands down. So back in December, Laura and I read Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio, which is the first book in the Sun Eater saga, which is planned to be 7 books long. I think 5 of them are out. The 6th one is out in arc, whatever. Laura decided she wanted to read some other things. I decided I wanted to go on ahead and crack into Howling Dark, which is the 2nd book, and that is the book I want to talk about today. Okay, Ross, control yourself. Here is the book. This here is a first UK edition hardback, and these are this was incredibly difficult to get my hands on, let me tell you. Apparently only 300 UK ones were printed, and that was a special commission by Anderida Books. And you can see inside, this one here is signed and numbered and also personalised. Pretty incredible. Number 132. So let me tell you, that was hard to get. So this is a bit of a familiar story in traditional publishing. Gollancz didn't really give Christopher Ruocchio the support he needed when he released the first few books of the Sun Eater saga, and that is possibly why they are so difficult to get your hands on, at least in hardback, at least first edition. You know, the fact that this company, Anderida Books, even had to commission them especially from Gollancz in order to get it, to get them out there, is extraordinary. Thankfully, it seems, for various reasons, that Ruocchio's books are in better hands. We've got Head of Zeus and now the publisher in the UK. Obviously, there's been a massive amount of viral support for the Sun Eater saga now. You've got major YouTubers publicising these books on their channels, and finally he's getting the sales and the support that he deserves, because these books are, the 2 that I've read so far have been astonishing, and everyone tells me that they just keep getting better. So that's that's enough of the context. Let's talk a little bit about how the world in which this book starts into. If you go back to our book club video for Empire of Silence, which does have a few spoilers in, and then we also had a fantastic spoiler chat with Sam Harrison, friend of the channel, you'll learn that the main character is this guy, Hadrian Marlowe, and he is born an aristocrat, then has the first book is essentially his Dark Night of the Soul, where he's brought low, let's put it that way, and then throughout the course of that book, it's about him regaining his status and going on his kind of moral crusade to save the galaxy and to save humankind from extinction at the hands of these rather terrifying alien marauders, called the Sealsin. And the framing narrative of all of these books is that they are told in the form of a memoir from a distant future after Hadrian has basically done something very cataclysmic and all around seen as very bad for people. And that kind of moral quandary, that kind of his you can see all the foundations of him coming to that big moral decision all the way through these first 2 books. There are so many instances where he has a moral question to answer and then thinks he does the right thing and then causes just horrible consequences. But anyway, more about that in a minute. The 2nd book starts a bit of a time jump from the first book, and then Ruocchio goes through and kind of backfills some of the events that happened in that time. So you're not left thinking, oh, that's what happened before. What he does, he basically does that in order to get to the bit that's important and get really to the themes of the book. And we're about to jump into the themes. This is a theme-heavy book. This book, chock full of themes. That's why it's so thick. I've already touched a bit on Hadrian's moral crusade. That's the only way I can really put it. He is determined to do the right thing, and in so doing, almost always does the wrong thing, which is hilarious, and it makes for such hilarious in a sad, ironic twist way. It's there's so much eye rolling as you go oh, he's done it again. He's thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's balls it up again. Classic Hadrian. That's a theme, throughout these books, is him trying to do the right thing and invariably causing issues. Let's go grab some tea. The consequences in the first book were probably more personal, I'd say, and then in this one, I'd say they're beginning to get a bit more galactic in scale, a bit major, lots of people's lives at stake, all those kinds of things, and that kind of matches this kind of growing scale of the story. So eventually he's going to get to the point where he does something that basically results in billions of lives being affected. So we're starting out small, we're gaining in intensity, things are going bad. There's that impending sense of dread, things are going to go bad just all the way through these books, which sounds horrible, but it's fantastic. But that isn't the key theme of this book. The key theme, very clearly, is the question, what does it mean to be human? And that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but not in the way he does it. There are two aspects I think he identifies, or maybe three aspects that he identifies to what it is to be human. Of course, there's the body, there's the mind, and on a more kind of cosmological, theological level, there's the soul. The first act is mostly interested in the question, what mind is left when the body is replaced? And the way that Ruocchio explores this question is through the invention of these cybernetic enhanced humans called SOMs. Essentially, humans who have replaced parts of their body or have had parts of their body replaced, and therefore also parts of their nervous system, their brains replaced, in order to either execute certain functions, more efficiently, or, more often is the case, to assume some element of control over them. And if you don't have your free will, your ability to choose what you want to do, and your mind can be commandeered at a moment, are you still human? That is the key question of Act 1. I don't want to... It's really difficult to talk about these deeper themes without spoiling, but I think we can get there. So Act 2 kind of moves on from that, and we are introduced to this mythological character called Hansagara. And we're told that Hansagara has somehow found a way to achieve eternal life. Throughout the book, he is kind of seen as this kind of mythical figure who happens to just be at the center of Hadrian's quest to find this planet called Vogossos. The kinds of things that Hadrian discovers through his pursuit of Hansagara, through his gradual kind of learning about who this creature, man, is basically, can you disconnect the mind from the body? Can you have some continuity of consciousness when the body has been discarded or when the body has reached its natural lifespan through aging? And so basically all these questions about what it means to be human, this is the meat of the book. The book is a very chunky, meaty book about this philosophical question, what does it mean to be human? We also delve a little bit into the past of this world as we discover some of the aspects that resulted in the current status quo through the death of the old Earth at the hands of, essentially, AIs who were created by the American Empire. So you occasionally get these little kind of flashes of American place names, like in these in these kind of weird diatribes that is kind of like, it sounds all kind of very heady and cerebral, and suddenly you hear Los Angeles and San Francisco, and it's just so weird, but it's so good because it reminds you that this world that we're exploring is the future from our current present. So I love that. I think that's all brilliant, and the way that this book explores the question of AI and what AI can do and the threat that AI is also exquisite. This book, if in a word, this book is exquisite. Not only does this book explore these philosophical questions in stages, it also explores them through different methods. So if you look at this kind of storytelling approach, the first act, you're exploring this mostly through action and through Hadrian's meeting of characters and doing his freelance mercenary thing in order to find the planet of Vogossos. And then the second act is mostly explored through dialogue. And that's where we get into the really, I already said the word meaty, but the really deep philosophical stuff is in the second act. I mean, we get a bit of it in the first, and the second, it builds on it. And then the third act just goes other places. And I really don't want to spoil anything about the third act for you. I benefited from not knowing anything about it, and so I'm not even going to touch on it, but let's just say it's beautiful. So you've exhaustively touched on themes. Let's have a little look at characters. These are mostly the same characters from the first book, that some of them we met right at the end of the first book. There are a few new characters, and I've already touched on the mythical characters as well, like Hansagara, who is new to this book. I think the biggest compliment I can give this book is that all the characters have a distinct voice and complex motivations. And I think that is basically kind of all you need for a compelling character. I can't think of a single character who is surface level in this book. They all seem to have something, some kind of desire, some greater need, some morality, which just makes them all very interesting. I have no no complaints about any of the characters. One of the things I really liked about this book is that, we spent a lot of the first book kind of exploring this burgeoning, slightly fraught relationship between Marlowe and Valka, who is essentially seems to be his main love interest for this series. But right at the start of the book, we discover that they're not together. In fact, Hadrian is with someone else, a lady called Jinan. And so that I found really interesting, the way that these relationships that Hadrian has with these different women and how his moral choices affect the way that he relates to them. It gives everything a deeper emotional resonance. Like, it takes these galactic questions and makes them personal again. So I think that's really effective. Okay, so that's enough on characters. Let's quickly talk about style. And once again, I mean, Ruocchio's prose is just so grandiose. It's unashamedly purple, and I kind of love him for it. I mean, it helps that everything is being told. It helps that everything's being told through the eyes of Hadrian Marlowe, who is a very melodramatic person, and that is kind of played for laughs a few times, which I think is brilliant. Like, it gives you an excuse to write really flowery prose without it feeling trite or without it feeling saccharine. There's just something like he's managed to contrive a way to be able to write this stuff, which is brilliant. I admire him for it. There is obviously it taking place in Hadrian's past. There is plenty of foreshadowing because he knows what's going to happen, and Ruocchio uses this really incredibly effectively by essentially kind of these little kind of drops of like, this was not going to happen the way I expect. These kind of little drops of foreshadowing that prime the mind and build the tension for the next section. So that you can't feel safe. That things aren't going to happen in the way that they seem destined to happen. It's like he's undermining the momentum, the gravity of the events, and saying, actually, this is going to happen a different way. And that keeps you guessing and keeps you interested. It's a hook. He's got these bloody barbed hooks in his writing. I hate him for it, and I love him for it. This is all impeccably told, at least in the UK. I think I've heard that in the US, there's a different narrator. It was very difficult to find out for sure. So if that isn't the case, then just ignore what I just said. But in the UK, we have Saul Reichthin as the narrator. And I am convinced that the choice of narrator came from Ruocchio, who clearly is a fan of Gormenghast and clearly must have heard the audiobook for Titus Groan, because Saul Reichthin's narration on Titus Groan is, if you go back to a first video on this channel, you can see I give him a shout out. It is just such extraordinary narration. I was a little bit concerned because Saul Reichthin's voice has so much character, has so many idiosyncrasies. I was wondering, is it going to lend well to a fairly straightforward story where the characters aren't caricatures like they are in Titus Groan? I mean, they all have such distinct personalities in that book. In this book, the characters, while distinct, aren't necessarily eccentric. And that's kind of where I thought Saul Reichthin would really come into his own. But as much as I think my concerns were valid, I think he also answered those concerns. I think he did a really extraordinary job narrating this book, especially with that kind of wizened, older wizened? I don't know. With that older voice, the kind of affected voice that he gives Hadrian as the kind of the old narrator of the story. There were some characters I think he perhaps did a bit of a dirty on, like it reminded me of Lady Fuchsia in Titus Groan, how he kind of voices a lot of the women. There's kind of a bit of a weird inflection he does. This is all counterbalanced by his incredible performance as the Painted Man, which really brought in mind Prue Squalor from Titus Groan, a very nasal, hideous voice that made the picture that Ruocchio paints in your mind visually, it pairs it so well with this really distinct, horrifying voice. So Saul Reichthin did an incredible job. I personally listened to it on 1.2 times speed rather than 1 time speed, and I think I could have listened to it at one time speed, but the nature of doing a booktube channel is you've got to read a lot of books. So I went through this book probably actually faster than I would have ideally enjoyed it. Kind of part of me wanted to savor it, and part of me wanted to rush on so I could just keep enjoying it in that kind of addictive storytelling. So with that in mind, let's go on to the final thoughts and the score. Because personally, I think I haven't been this eager to pick up the next book in a series probably since A Song of Ice and Fire, way back when I read that in 2011. There's something about this story which is addictive, which just makes you so keen to keep coming back and find out what happens to Marlowe next. There's just a blank space ahead of me apart from this cataclysmic ending, and not knowing what happens between now and there, it creates such curiosity, such eagerness, such kind of need to find out. So with all that in mind, I have no hesitation in giving this book a perfect score. I'm going to give it 17 out of 17 unnecessary cybernetic legs. And the first act, if I could give it more, if I could give it 18 out of 17 unnecessary cybernetic legs, then I would, because everything in that first act is so vividly painted, expertly told, some of the best sci-fi I think I've ever read. So, do you get the picture? You need to read this book. Go and find Howling Dark if you can possibly find a paperback, or if you can get the audiobook, get it. Obviously read Empire of Silence first, but I'll join you on Demon in White in book 3. Whew. Okay, those are my thoughts. That was the review. I need to do the other thing, which is you need to, if you can, please like and subscribe. It really, I mean, people joke, but it really does help us out. Not in the, in the algorithmic way, but also in the validation way. It lets us know we're doing something good. So please do click the like button, and while you're at it, click the subscribe button. You know, it's a simple click. It's just there. Go follow us on Instagram at Hardy's Books. We have a TikTok at Hardy's Books. And lastly, we also have a website where we sell rare and antiquarian books, and also some modern first editions, signed copies, all that kind of thing. So go to hardysbooks.co.uk and go and buy a book. I hope you enjoyed this little review, and we'll see you for the next video. See you then.